community college contributions to jobs and the economy. Vice Chancellor Yvonne Ton Quinlivan. Okay.
All right. Good afternoon. I'm going to go solo today on our discussion, and I am most grateful, as I know all of you are, with the passage of Prop 30, because we don't have an imminent crisis to deal with, and we can focus on helping California get back on track. Can you hear me? Okay, very good. I might have shared with you a whole campaign that was launched by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which, you know, we're just one of 50 states. It was very surprising that they launched an entire campaign called California Comeback, because to them, it is not possible for the nation to recover if California can't get back on its feet. And so we have a critical role to play on that. And I invite you to, once again, be a part of this discussion on our strategies to play our role in helping California get back on its feet. So what I wanted to do here was to lay out the response that was asked. I think it was Member McDougall who asked us about an approach, a task force approach on how we improve our responsiveness to the workforce needs of California. And so Chancellor Harris and I had a chance to meet about what we're going to lay out for you today, which is the continuum of responses that we need and sort of the approach to that. And what we'd like to do is then come back in January with a more detailed blueprint. So we wanted to preview this with you today to get any feedback, further feedback before we start blueprinting. And then for the benefit of Chancellor Harris, what I wanted to do is just summarize some of the key points that we had heard from the various speakers along the way and the points that they've made, because they are all voices that are constituents in our ecosystem. So if you remember, Becky Morgan from the California Forward, and who was a sponsor of the California Economic Summit earlier this year, her words were that the action is at the regional level. And it's not infrastructure, not innovation, not capital, not even regulation that is the most pressing issue, but the number one vote amongst the regions was that they needed skilled workers by sectors. From Tim Rainey, who came from his roots were in the California Labor Federation and is now head of the California Workforce Investment Board. Remember, he told the story about his father, who was 30 years with a company, and they did all the training. But for what it is now, it is really a retraining economy where workers have to continuously skill, reskill, upskill, and they need different ways of being able to access this kind of training with multiple on-ramps and off-ramps throughout their journey and life. We heard from Diane Van Hook, who is Chancellor of the Santa Clarita District, that trust with employers take time, and so the tenure of college CEOs shortening, we need to think about alternative approaches to fortify our response in the region. We heard from the SEIU United Healthcare West, which was a project that we invested time in, and that the issue of access is not just an access to our, sort of our butts and seats, access to our institution, but really at this moment in time, for some of the careers of the future and of the current, that access is an issue of training. If you don't have training, especially in the allied health area, you can't get the jobs. So there's 100% correlation in that sense. So when we think about access, we need to think about the pathways, but all the prerequisites to those jobs. And then least but not lastly, Nancy Shulak, whom you all know well, she talked about some of the policies. Many of our policies originated with the transfer mission, but some of them don't work or align well in terms of what we need at this point for the workforce mission. They may have worked in the past, but now with the current situation of the state of the nation, and frankly the call to action for us, that some of these policies are not in alignment with sort of the level of performance that we need from the system. So we've all had these conversations, engaged with these speakers, but I wanted to share with you that as we lay out these continuums of response, it is also, I'm also adding in this whole last year a lot of bringing leaders from the field to really discuss what are the challenges facing the system. And then even more recently, I've achieved, what did they call it, the travel status at Southwest, because I was on the road for 12 field visits over the last 2 months. And this was in combination with the Academic Senate. So they've had to join me, and it's to visit with stakeholders in regions in these critical conversations on jobs and the economy. The initial critical conversation started out with around 20 people in the room, and the latest ones were about 120, not only involving our system, but the workforce system, the employers, the chambers, et cetera, who have a dependency on us performing at this level. So I'd like to roll out 3 sets, sort of the continuum of activities that we can take on to increase our system's responsiveness. The first are administrative fixes, which are already currently underway. The second is, as I mentioned before, our economy is not monolithic. It's a set of 15 regional economies. So to the extent that we can improve our responsiveness to the region's economy and remove obstacles that are in the way, then we can help further our strengthen California. So empowering regions and identifying what's in the way of regional responsiveness is the second continuum. And then in the third level is really to do the very, very hard discussions around rethinking our funding and what structurally, how structurally we should think about funding. And I will acknowledge this continuum brings with it impact as well as difficulty. So if you take a look at these 3 in the continuum, the first one is, I would say, medium impact, and not without its difficulty, but like the braided funding stream that you approved this morning, they are things that are, I would say, lower set of difficulty because the constituency is narrower. In terms of empowering regions, that would be a medium impact, medium difficulty. And then in the last chevron, it's rethink funding. Clearly, there's a lot of, a wide range of constituents, wide range of opinions, and we need to take on a much more expansive process to do that. And so those are the 3 that I'd like to just quickly hit, if you don't mind. Okay? Oh, I just wanted to quickly share with you here a list of all the critical conversations, the 12 and counting. Basically, I broadcasted out there who would like to host a critical conversations, and everyone from consortiums to chancellors and deans had me come out there, and they organized the whole event. And we had some nice feedback. And Wheeler North, I think, attended with me 5 of these sessions. Phil Smith from Academic Senate also attended 5. And then we had Diane Chabadi and David Norse also attended. So thank you, Michelle, for deploying your folks. And at every single one, I introduce our partnership with the Academic Senate because, again, I think this is a shared venture, and it was good for all of us to listen to the pain points in the field and how we came across to the other constituents who are depending on our system to be responsive. And so I know that last week, Wheeler and Phil Smith held a session, a workshop with Academic Senate Forum on what were some of their learnings and some of the areas of professional development that we all need to work on together, and how do we support the field in that. So administrative fixes. I've shared with you before the Doing What Matters for Jobs and Economy framework, and that's in flight. And again, what you approved today was for us to target incentive funding, the EWD SB 70 Perkins 1B, these are incentive funds, against the 3 themes of sectors, regions, and technical assistance by braiding our RFA so that the field could then braid their funds, braiding it with their local regional resources, and then against the common accountability metrics that Patrick had just shared, which flowed from the Student Success Task Force work. And this is part of what I can concept right now of a 3-phase process. Phase 2 will be about moving the needle. So as you start concentrating on the scorecard, then how do we help the field with tools to move the needle in terms of these momentum points and these top high-level metrics? And then phase 3, as we get greater clarity on what's working or not working, we need to work on incentivizing scaling excellence, which is a comment from Undersecretary or Assistant Secretary Martha Cantor, which is that we have lots of pilots, but the issue all states have is how do you scale excellence? And so that would be the third leg of this work. So, so that's the administrative fixes, and we're in flight with that. Are there any questions on that before I go on? Okay. So let's go to the second chevron, which is about empowering regions. So what we'd like to recommend here is that we take on a consultation process of, instead of forming a new task force, that we actually leverage existing bodies, which I'll introduce to you over the next few slides, and that use those bodies in order to synthesize what are some of the recommendations. And through them, we would publish either guidance documents and effective practices, because many of them reside in that realm. And then if there's any Title V policy recommendation, then we would take them to the Board of Governors for approval. And of course, at any time, we'd be happy to give you an update on that. But the key questions there are, what enables regional responsiveness to labor market demand? And this has to do with the curricular approval process. This has to do with pooling demand on contract education. There's jurisdictional issues. There's even the impediments, who gets to count completion. So as we're rolling out the Doing What Matters framework, then we're getting feedback that, hey, what we need to relook at are some of the things in our way, because the system is set up for colleges to work individually more so than regionally. So especially as funds get tight for regional programming, as funds get tight and we have to do regional programming, we need to make sure that just everything is shepherding regional cooperation. Any questions on this? So really 2 questions. What enables regional responsiveness, and what are the impediments to regional collaboration? I'm really heeding Chairman Himmelstein's request to power through this. All right. So here are the existing bodies that, frankly, I had the pleasure of pulling together and consulting with in developing the grounds up Doing What Matters for Jobs and Economy framework. So this is a group of people ranging from researchers to our foundation to different parts, sort of leaders from within the workforce mission throughout the field, who volunteered their time to come here and listen to the challenge and really engage in how do we problem solve. So they're the first sounding board. We also have representation in consortia, and they represent all the various regions. So their voices, this is from Voice of the Regions within our system. We also have two other sets of bodies. The Economic Workforce Development Initiative directors, who are more sector focused. And then on the right is an association of CTE deans and faculty members. So as you can see, there's lots of representation across our state, across these bodies. And I'm going to jump to the next one. And in addition to that, on the right, we have the California Workforce Investment Board, a set of agencies where we have interdependency. So we meet on a regular basis. And then on the left, we've had a formal advisory group called EDPAC, which I'm expanding to WEDPAC in order to advise the broader integrated braided funding theme. And so these are the existing bodies that we'd like to leverage and seek counsel from in order to call out the recommendations for the second chevron. Any thoughts? Other than feeling what Peter McDougall said is, you're in a lot of meetings. Yes.
That's a lot to coordinate.
It is, but it was through conversations with all these bodies, actually, that we
Yeah.
came up with the Doing What Matters framework. All right, so then let's go to the third chevron, which is why would we want to rethink funding? And Chancellor Harris, when I met with him before he had this role, he actually asked me to take the data that you've seen before, which is reflecting the 10-year trend of use of CTE, FTEs, so full-time equivalents, how they're being used for the system. And what you see here is, and he challenged me to lay it out in different ways. And so what you see here, and what I've taken out to the critical conversation, is how the 10-year pattern in each region has looked. So that they could see for themselves what is happening, and really just have the question of is this what each region wants? And almost in every region, when you ask what's happening, why is this pattern happening, they said it's the high cost of CTE. And then there were other comments as well. So I think we need to have the hard conversation is, do we have something structurally in the way of us being responsive? And the time is now to have that conversation. And so what I'd like to suggest is a consultation process that is more of the Student Success Task Force imprimatur, so that level of conversation, because this is a very big conversation, where the Chancellor forms this task force with the wide representation, including our institutional leadership, industry, the big unions, the workforce system, legislative staff, a big role for faculty to play in advising and counseling how we approach this, students, researchers, and the Board of Governors themselves. Have a multi-constituent process to come up with some recommendations where we can solicit field feedback via the webs and town halls like as was used before. And then should there be any legislative or Title V policy recommendations, they be taken to consultation committee before the Board of Governors. And the questions to be asked of this important group would be as follows. And as you can see, I did not phrase it in just the CTE, because really we're looking at how do you respond to the needs of the workforce in California, jobs and economy for California. So the questions are, how should transfer pathways in demand by industry be funded? How should in-demand, high-cost CTE programs be funded? And how should basic skills contextualized in CTE, basically a twofer, be funded? I think these are the cogent questions for the day. They're very complicated. I recognize that. And so after consulting with Chancellor Harris, what we'd like to do is with your support, is to take this third chevron in particular back to blueprint out how a plan of action and bring it back to you in January timeframe. And so that's it.
Okay, thank you. Comments or questions? Member Baum.
First, thank you for the comprehensive report, because this is the area I think that we will be, for lack of a better word, challenged by the for-profit sector as well. And to see we're going through a very comprehensive strategic approach in thinking about this, and by the time we go through this entire process, there'll be more for-profit institutions opening their doors in California, while we continue to try to struggle with how to respond to people who want to seek careers in nurse, allied health professions, or other technical professions. So I'm hoping what we can do is give you the support to continue to collaborate, innovate, and then also come forward with some solutions that we can advocate for.
Yeah, the plan is that on the chevrons 1 and 2, that we'll go ahead, move forward on those, and then it's the chevron 3 that we need to think about structurally. How do we set that up, and come back with that?
Sure, it's just and
Yeah.
so you're going to come back in
recognize that.
January, right?
Member McDougall.
Yes, I'd like to suggest one other question for your consideration on the key questions. And it's a little complex. I'll try to make it simple. But what college or system requirements may need to be modified to enable the community colleges to respond to change in work requirements, respond in a timely manner? And the question may not be as clear as I would like it to be, but what happens to our system is we become calcified. We have requirements that pertain to everyone who works in the system, faculty, whatever. And what we need is we need a response modality that is quick, that is unaffected in some cases, in order to accommodate the pace of change that seems to be more and more a part of what is required to have a workforce that is up to date and responsive. So I think we have to look at ourselves, and we have so many strengths, but we also have areas that sometimes can prevent us from being as responsive as we would like to be.
Thank you.
Yeah, to that a little bit, Member McDougall, and even Member Baum, I understand what you're both saying. One question for me as well, and I think Member Baum's right, we could, be left behind here a little bit, but one of the reasons that I think we were successful on student success is that we had the force of legislation behind us as well. So, Chancellor, I don't know, and to Member Baum's point, that may really slow us down, but it's something to consider, moving forward. I mean, it does send the signal that we are very serious about this, and we have the backing of the legislature to come up with a solution.
And I think that's as the board knows better than I, that is a very fine line. The day that I was appointed, I got a call from Senator Steinberg, and his specific interest was workforce development. And I think the trick for us is to, working with the faculty in consultation, find the direction and then seek legislation to help
That's
us
it.
enact that, as opposed to what occasionally happens to us, which is we get a piece of legislation that nobody likes, and then we spend all of our time on defense trying to get out of that. So what Vaughn and I have agreed to do over the next 30 to 45 days is to try to craft a strategy that we think we can accomplish in a lot of ways what we've accomplished through the Student Success Task Force, but again, try to do that proactively as opposed to reactively.
Member McDougall, then Member Baum.
I'd just like to reinforce what the Chancellor said. I think we, under no circumstances, want to lose control
Yeah.
for giving direction to the system. At the same time, I don't think there's a better opportunity for us to go in with, if you will, a master plan for direction on workforce development. I mean, we've got the most effective delivery system of any place. And the time is right in terms of employment, in terms of need for change, and so it's a wonderful opportunity for us. But
Member Baum.
Again, I agree, but I'm also concerned too, because too often we have workforce development programs for careers of yesterday
Yeah.
instead of careers for tomorrow. And then if there's a way we can tie all our priorities for veterans to this, because I expect many of these programs will be, veterans will be counting on us to be providing these types of opportunities for them as they re-enter the workforce from their tours of duty.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Member Izumi.
Well, thank you very much, Vice Chancellor, for the excellent report as usual. Just curious in terms of some of these questions, like how should in-demand, high-cost CTE programs be funded and addressed? Have you has there been discussion about how other states look at some of these issues? And, you know, because I know that we have gathered up a lot of people who are stakeholders within the state, but in terms of looking outside the borders, what is going on outside?
Yes, states are pursuing a lot of options, and as I've shared in my critical conversation, for other states, they're not debating whether or not they should do anything. They're not debating whether they should do it. They're debating how they should do it. Florida just announced the results of their governor's task force, and they plan to price tuition differently. So those, for example, some of the STEM pathways that they want to encourage more graduates to go through, they want to price those tuition lower than the other tuition. In another state, I believe it was Kentucky, has six tiers of, that has more of a cost recovery model, which is 6 tiers of pricing based on the cost structure of the event. But we may not want to go there. I think, again, California has a set of dynamics here that what we need to do is we need to have the discussion and see what works in our state and for our culture and what would get the desired results.
I just think, just a follow-up, you know, for those of us on the board, it, you know, may be good to know about some of the other models that other states are pursuing, so it can be a topic of discussion, you know, so that we understand what kind of the universe of possible solutions that are being considered within the country. Thank you.
Chancellor Harris.
Board Member Zumi, I want to underscore your question. I think it's for quite some time we have seen in many other parts of the country in workforce and economic development 3 partners: the college, the companies, and the state. California policy going back, frankly, a couple of decades has been that the college and the companies should be working together, but that the state should not be additionally augmenting workforce development when they're already funding the colleges. And I think it's incumbent on us to help the policymakers and the legislators understand that it is certainly in the best interest of the state of California for the state to be a full partner in this workforce training. And as Member Baum suggested, we can't get out ahead of the labor market needs if, when we do that kind of research and development and labor markets go in a different direction, we get left holding the bag. We have to have the state as a full partner. So there are other states, many of them, Florida's a great example, where we can say to our policymakers, look at how this works. You get not only the college, the company, but you get the state participating, and you're able to get ahead of these labor market demands. And so by the time you get clean and green energy jobs, we're already ready to train those people. But there is a cultural change because the states sort of felt all along we shouldn't be spending taxpayer dollars to help companies get a workforce above what we're already spending in higher education. And we need to help them understand that that's fairly short-sighted.
That is short-sighted.
Thank you, Chancellor.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chancellor. Very good report.